Hey, welcome back. Week 7 of Mark's Headroom, where I talk about consciousness and spirituality and all the experiences, trying to relate them to other people. And this is a relatively free form medium that I'm working on here on this. It started out as a YouTube channel, and I'm also putting this on Substack and even on Roach Creative. I'm contemplating some applications for this content, and I appreciate people watching. And it's not like I'm trying to get a lot of viewers or likes here. In fact, one of my themes, and I've even used this in the oil business, is that small is beautiful. It's really about connecting, and if there's just a few people, that maybe one or two possibly, that might benefit from something that I put out, I'm compelled to put this stuff out here. And if it, I guess that's a little bit selfish, um, or not. I feel driven to do this, and a lot of people ask me why I do um, these videos, and why I've done a lot of things that I've done in my life, because I'm not motivated by money, and I'm not necessarily trying to press myself on other people, but I am trying to express myself. But I'll tell you, here's something that I just really stumbled on. Maybe I've known this at some level, but I'd never realized it so clearly as I do at the moment right now. I have this inner tension, and one of the only things that I can do to relieve that inner tension is to write and talk and use my life in an interactive means to reflect and structure some either film work, or sometimes it's music or poetry or research, and assemble all of these random or seemingly random bits of knowledge and information that I gather, and try to bring those together in one place where they can live in harmony. So it's the external and internal, but I have a knowledge, mind, body, soul, spirit. I'm all over the place. And I have access to a lot of those channels kind of independent of each other. And then I come back and I try to figure out how to rationalize that, or what does that mean for me, or what did I learn from that? And as I find, as a kind of the feedback I get from about Mark's Headroom, is one of the most prominent aspects of it is that I do this at the end of a 5-day fast, and before I begin eating for a couple of days. And I've been doing these 5-day fasts for this is about 4 years now. And so I get on camera, it's live. I've done a little bit of reflection and research about what I've shared in the past few weeks, and what I've been encountering during the week of my life, and in the research and the writing and the acting that I'm doing in the my work with Transcendent, which is about PTSD, and the writing that I do, which a lot of that has been in trying to create a novel, a fiction book series that reflects some of the conscious learnings that I've put together for the Transcendent channel. And then I also do Future Wise Energy, where I talk about, probably 2 or 3 times a week, I do a kind of a market update as to what I see going on geopolitically, as well, from the perspective of an oil man. And I think I started off talking here about how I'm delivering this message under, I put myself in kind of a survival state, and I work out heavily an hour or two every day, and continue to do this for over I think I'm over 4 years now of doing the 5-day fast and 2-day eating, week after week after week without a break. So, um, I'm not recommending anybody else do that, and I have a lot of, I put some notes out there for other people that have asked about fasting, and I've learned a lot about the process over the past, I've been fasting with different types of, extended, 2-3 week fast, 2-3 day fast, 1 day fast for, alternating every other day. All those things I've tried, but this is the one that I really enjoy. It really gives me some consistently uh, challenging kind of a refuge where it's let me hone in on that tension that I described earlier, where I have this need, this calling, so to speak, to resolve that tension. And it's really cool what's been happening since I started doing this max headroom. I felt like, although I'm speaking to the collective, and maybe there's only a few from the collective that are in the audience, so to speak. Nonetheless, this is something I really challenge myself to do, to get out in front of the camera and and put this out here for others who may be on the same wavelength that I am, in the same tribe, so to speak. And that'd be great if this is passed around, and even after I'm dead and gone, this might find a home for someone that it just, gives a little bit of comfort to, and that'd be a real blessing. But my search to to resolve this inner tension is really the deeper motive behind a lot of the things that I've done in my life. And so I know that I've done a lot of things without really understanding where I was going. And sometimes they came off as being altruistic or charity. And, but I always felt like there was this deeper tension that I was really being moved to try to resolve. And I'm in touch with that. And I don't, well, by interviewing a lot of other people in my life, even a lot of people that are in, um, some fields where you would kind of expect that they would be, it's not all that common. Let me share a few things some notes here that I put together, and an interesting memory hit me just this morning that I wanted to share. Back in like 1986, I remember going to work. I'd graduated from college and immediately started with Mobil Oil Company in this little field, operating a little oil field in southern Illinois called, I think they put me as the engineer over this oil field that was called New Harmony Unit. And it was in southern Illinois. The office was based in Crossville, little town. And there was a lot of, real simple people working in the oil field there. And I remember walking into the office the first Wednesday that I was at work, and using the restroom, and I'm standing there, and some guy on Wednesday says, "It's hump day, we're almost there." And I remember saying to myself, I didn't say anything then, I was just being polite, but it really, really struck me powerfully that these people didn't want to be here. They didn't want to be doing this. And I thought, man, what have I gotten myself into? Because I was all about every moment of my life counting towards something deeper or more meaningful, and I didn't want to waste it. But it kind of put me in my head at the time, because I just kind of bowed up, but I examined that a lot and found that what exactly that inner tension that I mentioned earlier was at work inside of me, and it's just kind of like a chainsaw, guiding me from circumstances and decisions and choices and people and relationships to uncover where I needed to go. So that's kind of my, at least at this moment, this is my inner description of how I've navigated kind of the artist way in my life, is trying to find things that would relieve that tension. Of course, I tried alcohol and sex and, achievement and, um, a lot of fighting and intellectualism and a number of things that had no reward in that part of my inner life. So that's, there's no escape from that. Even the pharmaceuticals that when I was misdiagnosed and and you know, dealing with what people deal with in their 30s and 40s these days, it seems, um, no relief, no vacations. I couldn't go anywhere. There's no relationship. There was no job. There was no title. There was no sense of anything that I could do that would create any comfort that in my future. There was no achievement that would do that. And I guess, as you might expect, that made me a rather interesting person to have in your to be in the room with. I might be entertaining for a therapist or a counselor or a priest or a lawyer or another billionaire or whoever, in the oil business. And I had some talent to work with in many of these fields that did not bring any relief to that tension inside of me. So it's been the culmination of all of these experiences and feedback from others and the notes that I've kept over the years to remember who I really am and to come to this point where I'm sitting here talking mostly about consciousness as I've reviewed the transcripts from the last 6 episodes of Mark's Headroom in particular. And then some of the novel work that I've done recently. This idea of spirituality and consciousness is just, it's just pouring all over me and bringing some comfort and relief to this inner tension that I have. But that memory of hump day on Wednesday and the idea of TGI Friday, thank God it's Friday, and like we've gotten this bad stuff behind us this week and I'm ready for the weekend and I can escape what I was in. No, that never worked for me. It was always this tension was carrying me through every moment of my life, and there has been no relief from that. And even whenever I drowned to death in a riptide or was struck by lightning, those things interrupted a process that was going on in me. And I honestly, I found myself saying, if it was my time to go, I would have been okay with that. There's people I love, there's things that I feel like are left for me to do here in regard to resolving that tension. And those 2 times in particular seemed like a reset. And then there was also the time that I ruptured my patellar tendon, had to have surgery that really shifted my identity around and gave me some interesting viewpoints on myself, my past in particular, having had such a strong physical and athletic view of myself. And that really shifted a lot of those things. So that memory was powerful. And I remember one of the things it led me to do, which was quite interesting at the time. I took a vacation with my wife, and I think it was after my first child had been born. we went to Florida. And while we were in Florida, because we never really had a honeymoon, we married between my junior and senior year. And we went to Florida and had our, kind of a legit honeymoon. And I was making enough money that we could afford to do something extra. And I came back to the oil fields in Crossville. And I had this frustration with the profession that I had chosen, but I knew that I had some responsibilities I had to take care of. But I found that there were a lot of people that I was totally out of concert with. And it wasn't like I was any, new age or hippie but I was nonconformist to a lot of the traditions and patterns that I saw around me. And these guys, I just couldn't help to try to do something to shake things up. So when I was in Florida on this vacation, I had my left ear pierced and had a little gold stud in it, and I I was kind of nervous about going into the office with that. I mean, this is Mobil Oil Company in 1986, maybe 87, um, probably the spring of 87. And I remember wearing a hard hat out on location, and the foreman, I think his name was Ed Yount, guy from Oklahoma, real, big, strong, tough guy. Um, they didn't know what to think of me. They knew I wasn't, most of those guys thought, the only people that had earrings were gay men. And of course they'd been around me enough to know that was probably not my, my tendency, but, they gave me a hard time about it. And, I don't think I really cared for it all that much, but I had the impact, and at least I kind of, got some free space around me for having, being in this traditional role, being a petroleum engineer, being involved in the oil business, and having a leadership role in this corporate environment. Um, I had to do something to kind of express myself, but it really seemed to be related to that, idea of wasting your life, and of this idea of, I don't mean waste. I mean, for me, with my inner tension, if I hadn't taken some of the risk and made some of the changes that I've made in my life, and even kind of invited some of the um, conflict, I didn't pursue the conflict directly. It wasn't about the conflict or the rebellion or anything like that. It was just about this tension. It's saying, I've got to try something different here. I've got to look deeper. And it wasn't anything really personal with the people that I was around. It was a spiritual quest to uncover what was going on deeper inside of me. And just recently, I've been getting more and more clarity over kind of a model of what's been going on with mankind for as far back as we know. And it even has a cosmic, perspective that's becoming more and more clear to me. At the moment, I'm getting more and more able to think clearly about it, and write about it, and hopefully I'll be able to speak about it with enough clarity that it can help reach others that might also be game for something like this path, that it seems like I'm here to at least live myself and leave a trail that might be helpful for somebody else, or have an influence on others. I mean, I don't know where this is really leading sometimes. I guess in my fantasy world, it would, I'd have a bunch of people notice what I'm talking about and say, wow, he's got a point there. Let's look deeper, right, into my life, into like your life. And rather than following some of the traditions and patterns that most people that most people naturally find themselves exploring and following, maybe there's something here that would be a better way of living, or a more comfortable way of building a future in harmony. And I'm not looking to build a utopia, but I do have this idea that capitalism and some of our ideas about work and how we spend our life and what we trade for in life are not absolutely necessary. And I think I'm finding a channel of consciousness that makes that more. There's the language around it that's starting to come together for me, and there's process around it that I'm able to speak to illustrate this for other people who may become more and more aware of how those old patterns that people have been repeating for year after year after year, or generation after generation after generation, that's not necessary. But there has to be some other way of living or framing our our mindsets, our viewpoints, our models of how things work for people to operate differently. So, I remember, and part of that is another childhood memory that I have. That was 86, 87. I was in my early 20s there. But I remember back in elementary school, my first encounter, my memory with the collective is more like playing kill the man with the ball at recess in elementary school where I grew up in Springfield, Missouri, and seeing this big crowd chase me around and try to take the ball away from me. And then the teachers kind of tolerating this thing because it was burning off energy, and as long as we didn't get too rough. But then on occasion, we would be scolded for playing that game. But I remember running with that ball, and this relationship that I felt with the collective there's a hostility, there's a competitiveness, there's it was rather primal. And that experience, especially even the name, killed the man with the ball. I mean, I think that says it all. So that relationship, or that view, or that deep vibe about what the collective experience, or what the individual with the collective experience is totally unsupported and totally violent and primal. That doesn't seem like a safe place, and it's taken me a long time to get more comfortable to be able to explain and understand how operative that may have been in my psyche over the years, in walking into a room and sensing opposition before it's even presented itself as opposition. You get what I'm saying? I also grew up, or actually, when they brought me home from the hospital, I was brought to a home that was about 100 yards away from a national cemetery. And Rudolf Steiner speaks a lot about some entities that exist in the earth. And there's even some others that talk about mines and caves and, quarries, where there's these entities that may be trapped on earth that work from those places. So I've often wondered about that, and I don't have, great sensory, contact, and those spirits and entities don't really speak to me, but I feel like they are an influence in some way, and I can't put my finger on it. Maybe there's some people out there that do. understand that much better than I do. I know I've listened to Rudolf Steiner, some of his lectures from the 1920s and 30s that speak to that and put some ideas around that. I think even Ra Uru, who spoke some about what that might be about. And of course, there's plenty of others that talk about channeling. And I feel like like you've heard me say in the past, I think neuroscience is showing that we only know about 5% of everything that's really happening around us. So, but that early childhood experience of that cemetery was also very formative for me. And I can remember my father, who was a Marine, saying he wanted to be buried there. And I thought, at the age that he told me that, I was a little young to be thinking about death and my dad and his vulnerability like that. But nonetheless, that was one of the ideas or thoughts that I kind of sat with this week that has a psychic space for me. And I've had a lot of encounters with people who were dying, or, like there was a lady that that I dated around 25 years ago or so, whose son I played catch with after his father had killed himself earlier that day. I've had even a boss came to me that at Mobil, um, called me into his office, and his daughter had committed suicide. And I thought, this guy's 15 years older than I am. Why is he asking me or talking to me about this? Well, there was a comfort that I had with some of the life processes, and also I think this being an open person that wasn't judgmental and really cared about people. I think that shown through a number of times in my life. And I think in those moments, I was really searching for an identity and trying to determine, what was going on with this inner turmoil that I felt, this tension. And it wasn't about that relationship with that woman or that boy necessarily, or that superior of mine at Mobil. But it was actually the common experience between all those was a comfort with humanity, with people, regardless of the circumstances. The kid's father had blown his head off with a shotgun earlier that day after getting drunk on Jack Daniels and shooting himself in his garage. That scared off a lot of people. And I was there, and I didn't know exactly how it was gonna play out, but I was just there, playing catch with the kid. One of the most powerful moments of my life. So, that human condition has been something that I've explored my entire life, and, PTSD and what I talk about on Transcendent and actually letting your nervous system heal from traumas has been a powerful tool. EMDR is probably one of the most culminating points for me in my healing process. And I've had a chance to share exactly how to do that process with a couple of people this last week. And I found that to be very, well, I think they were ready for it. And I'm thankful for those moments that had a chance. It brought me back to some of my own inner work that I've done, but more than anything, it's given me clarity on the process that I've been through, of kind of stumbling into the search on my path to do the EMDR, to have the healing, to find the clarity, and to find some resolution following that. That I think is really, as I look around, I find that there's still a lot of confusion as to how to come out of that healing. What do you replug that healing space once it's there and you've shaken this identity about how things used to be? What do you use to fill that? And that's where some of the spirituality and consciousness work that I've been doing over probably the last, 10 years in particular, but the common theme from my early childhood into the present is around trying to place how things work and how we are operating and how we can have achieve our greatest potential and have this access to spirituality and this connection to God and the universe that's in concert with our higher calling. Sounds idealistic or altruistic, but that's what it is. Um, what else? Oh, I really encountered some people that were very much stuck in their head um, this week, confusing some of the objectives that they had in politics and in with religion and moral um, drives that are such a strong theme in the division and in the continuation of this polarity that we're caught up in. So I'm very excited about some of the work that I've been doing to find ways to communicate with other people and bring comfort that there may be some breakthroughs in what I see going on in the world that will lead to more and more people finding an access to ways not to identify with old patterns, stop fighting the old fights, and try to find a new way to structure our lives, our communities, and the world, and the way that we use our resources. Interestingly, as a petroleum engineer and oil man, so to speak, and someone that's been around the world and worked with a lot of people that had access to um, all the corporate knowledge from around the world, I can look at all that data and see what's going on in the world and realize there is enough. We don't have, I see people competing over resources, over the supply and demand thing that seem totally useless efforts. Because a lot of the efforts that are being made is if there's something to compete for, when actually there is enough. Clearly, there is enough. And if you just want to go back and look at oil, there's enough fossil fuel if we needed that to power the world. There's enough ways that we have alternatives to generate electricity if you were using those kinds of machines. There's enough, we can make enough food to feed everybody. And I think there's a way to keep the water clean and there's a way to clean up the planet. But there's these strong forces that divide us all, that are all connected to some of the old concepts of just not being awake enough to realize that there's nothing to fight for in the moment. Or if we are feeling like we need to fight, it's in these old patterns that we've been carrying forward from generation to generation to generation with these old viewpoints that don't have anything to do with the actual supply and demand that's around us today. So, there was I think it was Bernie Sanders. I listened to a very well-informed, maybe 10-minute explanation about his fears over what AI was going to do to the economy here in the US and jobs. But I think the thing that I walked away from after listening to that, I felt like a lot of the things he was saying were probably accurate and valid concerns. But I think what we are is looking for a way to enjoy all of those resources that we have around us without continuing to fight each other. And there's so much fight and conflict and drama built into the way that we operate in the world. The mindset is, about money and competition and achievement and scarcity and abundance and affluence and this top 1% and the masses control. And I think AI is going to, create robotics and opportunities, or it will destroy entire ways of operating in life for humankind. So I think mankind is set for a revolution and maybe an evolution in consciousness and way of looking at how things really operate, because a lot of the old models, the old constitutions, the old ways of basically lying, and I don't mean lying in an immoral sense, I mean just, like neuroscience is just giving us insights as to our form, our organic form, and how the mindset and viewpoints, identity, the psyche, the biases, and the prejudices are all housed in how we're interacting. So I'm that's still kind of unfolding in my mind space as to how some of those things might work out. You might listen into some of I've been reading my novel. I published the first novel. I think it actually became available today on Amazon and Kindle, and you can also order it on paperback. It's called The Stranger, and it's the Awakening Chronicles series. There's 20 novels I've got, and you can read that first one, and it kind of cracks some of the deep ancient wisdom open and tries to make it more accessible to and put it in plain demonstrated characters and circumstances to try to get the word out. It's not like people sit around reading philosophy or attending philosophy or religion courses. We're really more about entertainment, and we love to have stories to repeat. And there's some powerful things that I wrote there. As I've been reading it, I've been putting it on film, each chapter, and releasing it like that, because I just feel drawn to be authentic and to share what I have written from my head. And I challenge myself to put it into real feeling and words, oral words that are delivered on camera, just to be fully authentic. And it also gives me a different view on what I've created. And because whenever I'm so experiential that whenever I share that on camera, um, it can be kind of powerful. And sometimes I'm surprised at what I've written and how it may come together and how it's affecting me in my delivery with or for the collective. This mob that used to chase me around the playground as a kid when we were playing kill the man with the ball. Um, I continue to see, like I was talking about, the intellectualism, which really separates you from your spirit, your experiences. And I had someone ask me to tell him what it was like to fast for 5 days and what it really felt like to be in that survival state. And I realized how futile it was to try to explain that to an intellectual person who hadn't even really done without anything in their life. And um, so that was a powerful lesson for myself, not to disrespect what this person was asking, but just to realize the limits of our language. And, people have to have a contrast to be able to understand something. And I think to experience being without, or even choosing consciously and deliberately to structure a life of abstinence from something for a period of time brings an entirely different appreciation for your body and gives you access to parts of yourself that I cannot put into words. That's why we're here on Mark's Headroom, right? Um, Yeah, I saw a lot of people, a number of people. Let's take forgiveness, and I think I spoke about this last week some about the idea of understanding versus just, it says in the Bible, I need to forgive, so I'm going to forgive. But without any understanding of what you're really doing at a deeper level, are you really forgiving? Or are you just going through the motions? It's not for me to say. But I do have a tendency to look for people who demonstrate a deeper level of understanding of the things that they're talking about doing in their life. And it's like when someone says that they are praying for you, sometimes I am wondering if they're praying for me to have what I want, or are they praying for me to have what they think I need, or are they praying for me to go to hell? Because sometimes people that I have differences with, the tone and the vibe that I get from them are completely different. And for someone to say, I'm going to pray for you, it's kind of like someone telling you, oh, I'm tolerant of that view. Well, in that there's this dominant viewpoint that they're taking. They're acting like they're the judge and know what's right for everyone or for this other person. And they're just hoping that they'll come around to seeing it the way that they do. And I don't think that that's how I'll just go back to Jesus. Whenever I heard him, say, let those of you without fault, throw the first stone, and, to look inside, that seemed to be the more operative and more powerful theme that I saw or what I've read about in the stories and the accounts of what he instructed in certain circumstances 2,000 years ago, for whatever that's worth. There's a lot of people in our society that are not part of these studies that are being done. And I had someone that was pretty sharp that I came across pointed this out to me, that a lot of the medicine, the psychological practices, a lot of the problems that are being presented to be solved by universities and professionals are being presented by people that have means enough to stop what they're doing, present the problem to someone else, and so they work on solutions for that so they can return back to their position in society and resume that. It's just a kind of a circle of kind of sustaining the same situation or the same polarity. But the interesting thing is that there's an entire demographic out there that is unrepresented in the narrative, in the data that may be even considered to be valid data, like they don't matter. It's almost like if you go back and look at Deliverance, that movie, and you see how there's all these people in the mountains living this simple life, and we look at them like they don't matter, or that they're deformed and they're really not something that we care to deal with or be concerned about, because they're not in our modern community. In our communities, more and more move toward these big cities, and they become this kind of normalized, it's kind of like this trade that goes on between people in those larger communities, and economy forms. And if you're not in that circle, and if that circle only has a certain set of complaints, then those are the complaints that are the headlines, and those are the focus for everyone. That's what you see the news stories about. That's what you see that's what defines the the news cycle and brings our focus. But when I went around the world, I found that there were just countless other types of people out there and issues that were not addressed through mainstream or this narrative that's going on. And here in the U.S. in particular, my favorite analogy is the football phenomenon that we have, where people will, they'll tailgate and party and drink and eat, watch a football game, and they'll listen to someone tell them what's going on the field, like they can't call the game or understand what's going on themselves. And it's all just this common experience that we'll kind of celebrate that and say it's bringing community, it's bringing people together, and these warriors that are out there on the field, they become our heroes. Well, it is what it is, but I think if you're unable to separate yourself from it and see it for what it is, and decide consciously that this is what I want to be a part of, and I see some benefits in this, then maybe you're asleep. If you want to do that and you're awake, more power to you. Anyway, that's just a perspective, but those people without the microphones, like I cringed when I heard someone talking on Bloomberg, a CEO talking about how great the economy was. Well, there is a sector of society that is just killing it right now economically. And there's another part that is losing hope and is very afraid for the future. For that narrative to be played over the airwaves, and for, maybe, a whole lot of people that are listening to Bloomberg or running large companies that go home and tell themselves everything's okay. We must be doing a great job. The masses must be happy. That's not right for me. So that's where, that kind of led me into thinking about one of the really wise ladies that I've worked with in the past, exchanged a lot of ideas and thoughts with. She's a human design expert, as well as an expert in busting cults, and just a fascinating lady. She brought up to me that I reminded her of this fellow named Buckminster Fuller. And one of Buckminster's things was to work in cycles. Basically, you set some goals and everything, and at the end of the month, whatever you've aggregated, you just give it all away and then you start over. And there's not many people that are willing to operate like that. And to me, that's it's very much kind of metaphorically, it's similar to what I do with my fasting. And it's like living on the edge, and also using our experience in contrast to the traditional experiences that are around us. There's people that will never give away their wealth and live on the edge and challenge themselves to rebuild it next month, or over the next 6 months, or the next year or two. But if you do that, that can make life really exciting, and that can totally shift your viewpoint toward yourself, your fellow man, and about what chance you have to create and actually experience spirituality, understand how God works, and really see your fellow man more clearly, because that really will bring you alive. So Buckminster Fuller, he's an interesting person that you don't hear a lot about these days, but he had a really provocative life and did some very he was an engineer like me. I think he was from Illinois, and he ended up designing some very interesting architecture and had a fascinating life. I was I was doing some work with a food. What do they call them? A place where they distribute food to the needy. People that were some of the people may have been homeless, or families that just needed some extra food. And they really needed some a lot of help economically to make ends meet. So I was in one of these places in Austin and handing out food. It was sponsored by a church, and one of the guys that was in charge of this food bank, I guess they called it, wanted to when he showed up, he liked to try to get everybody to wait outside with their food so he could lead a prayer. And the prayer was designed to try to convert them into, Christianity. I remember one time I was there, and there were several Muslim people from the Middle East that had shown up there at this food bank, and he was very insistent that they wait outside, and they all formed a circle. And I noticed they all bowed their head and prayed and did the Jesus, kind of followed along with this very, what I felt was like a real dominant way of kind of being forceful but I think who am I to say? I mean, that was one of the reasons that they told everybody and raised money to enable the food bank to operate, was that they were going to try to bring people to their way of thinking and operating in life. And they were offering some benefits to those people. But deeper than that, I have to say, there's a lot of times there's a denial in what people really believe. And one of the questions that you can ask yourself and ask yourself as you're interacting with other people is, well, is that about God, or is it about money? Because a lot of people believe in money a lot more than they believe in God. Think about that. A lot of ideas around religion have been hitting me. And someone in a men's, I think it's a Christian men's Bible study that I'm in, where there's several affluent, really smart people from the community here in Austin that have known each other, some of them 30, 40, 50 years. And most of these people are quite a bit older than I am. And somebody was very critical of the Catholic Church. For me, I was like, okay, well, what's that about? The Catholic Church is the one that assembled the Bible in I think around 400 AD, 400, I don't know, 200 to 400 years after Christ died, they assembled the Bible. And they had the Old Testament and the New Testament. And of course, they kind of kept it close to the vest, and I think it was a lot of those letters and everything that were written by people that were around Jesus. Of course, Jesus didn't write anything himself, but there were a lot of people around him that wrote stuff that he said and did down on and put it on record, so to speak. And so a lot of this stuff began being assembled, 50 to 70 years after he died, and then and thereafter, and people were kind of acting in chaos about how to use what he had illustrated for them. And of course, as the story goes, and since I'm talking in 2025 now, and I'm only repeating what I can gather from scriptures and feel, kind of connected with spiritually. But, the birth of Christ from a virgin, well, you have to have some fantasy to to accept that, or faith, and then that he was crucified. Well, that's pretty easy to see that there could be evidence of that. And then the resurrection, where he was seen by, I don't know, 500 people or whatever the number was, and then really spoke to some people that were like these apostles and some special people that were authors in the that are documented in the New Testament, and then some of the writings that we see in like the Dead Sea Scrolls. You put all that stuff together and you move it forward, and you think, okay, well, the Catholic Church really dominated in the use of all of that information for years and years and years. And then when the printing press came out in like the 1400s, suddenly they started sharing this, and individuals had a chance to read for themselves what was in the Bible. And then 100 years later, the Protestant movement takes over, and people start thinking for themselves, and they start reacting against this institution and about the way that they're operating. And they even take, I think it was 70 chapters out of or I don't know, just maybe 12. They had like 77 or 78 chapters in their Old Testament, in the Catholic Old Testament, and they got rid of 12 chapters and kept. I'm getting my numbers mixed up here, but I think there may have been 66 books that are in like the King James Version and most modern day versions of the Bible. I think there's 27 books in the New Testament. And so the fact that that could happen in the 1600s, after 100 years after, or 200 years after the printing press became available, think about what's happening now with all the transparency that we have and the technology, and how we can view all of the history of mankind and the evolution of religion. And then we're seeing it kind of the transparency in religion and how it can be used to create cults and to kind of keep people asleep and keep people from really being in touch with their own humanity, their spirituality, their calling, their power. And if they all conform, then the chaos is a lot easier to deal with. So I'm throwing a lot of scattered stuff out there, but I think it's powerful to recognize that only 500 or 600 years ago did people really create a lot of the institutions and the mindsets, the viewpoints that people see as identity here in the United States. Because if you feel like you're a Baptist or you're a whatever, Lutheran, or you're a non-denominational Christian, or you're whatever, there's a lot of identity and a lot of kind of truth that people feel like they're connected to, that give them a sense of certainty about who they believe that they are, and without questioning anything. But if you go back and say, well, hey, this mindset has really only been around for 500 or 600 years, what is that in the whole history of mankind? And whenever they made these determinations after suddenly getting access to the actual manuscripts or the actual words and printed words, and they learned to read themselves and absorb it and develop their own conscious views about the spirituality, they drifted away from a lot of the ways that it had been used for the last 1,500 years. So if you think about that and where we're at today with the massive amount of information that we have and access to those manuscripts, to the things that, if you believe Jesus was prominent, or whoever, I'm not here to try to force an opinion on anyone, because I think we all basically have to live with ourselves. And my experience led me to believe in Christ. And that figurative or metaphor for me is something that seems to work well in my viewpoint in developing consciousness and in the way that I carry myself and the values that I have, and in my relationship with what I consider to be my spiritual side. That text I use in concert with that. And I kind of laughed the other day because I had this clear view of what it was like back 2,000 years ago when someone was trying to bring order to chaos, and they were telling the women to be quiet and the men to do this. And I thought, it's really funny for someone to be a rule maker, like a lot of these people were at the time. That's the only thing that they knew how to do, was to write down rules. You can do this, you need to do this, this, and this. And so if everyone, if the guy would have written down, well, they all wore blue shirts to this church service, then everyone, if you were following the written word, then everyone would be wearing blue shirts from that point on, as if it was a sacrament, or if it was the key to having access to God. And so I kind of got a kick out of that clarity that I had. But I could just see clearly the Greek-Roman influence and the limitations of language and the primal nature and the social patterns that were going on back then 2,000 years ago. They may have been noted alongside these efforts to capture what Jesus was really, the spirituality that he was using to turn over all of the old ways of working, to take the old way of law and of entitlement to the Jews, and just totally debunking everything that had really structured a lot of life on earth at that point in time, is not captured as in the Bible, and it hadn't been used quite that way. And so anyway, it was an interesting week in that regard, about exposing that and making it more and more clear to me. I also had a note, I've talked about the book that I've written and published recently, and I've got so many stories and books sitting around that hopefully that tension that's driven a lot of the writing and speaking that I've done, and acting in the circumstances, and all of the experiential examination of all these mystic texts and ancient mystics will start to settle into something more communicative. And anyway, I'd appreciate some feedback from anyone that's listening. Just a little comment. Doesn't have to be positive or negative, but just a note, makes a difference. You never know. You can see the views, like on YouTube, and you don't even really know whether to believe, whether the algorithm is giving you any exposure or not, or whether the view counts are even all that accurate. Some of them are probably by bots, for all I can tell. But I do appreciate the comments and the connection. Subscriptions are nice too. It's funny, I put some of the transcripts in to the feedback I had is that ultimately Mark's Headroom represents an attempt to develop a new platform that others might be able to use to operate on a more spiritual level. It's designed for those ready to examine the patterns that they've inherited, question the stories they tell themselves, and find ways to live from essence rather than personality. The unique value that I'm trying to bring here, at least from the outside looking in, is it lies not in in answers, but in providing the modeling of a life lived in questioning and demonstrating that it's possible to maintain vitality, creativity, and connection while refusing to conform to any singular identity or worldview. For those trapped between worlds, Mark's Headroom offers evidence that the space between can be inhabited with dignity, purpose, and even joy. I kind of like the idea of that, and I would like to know what you think about it too. This is Mark's Headroom, week or episode 7, October 10th, 2025. I'm going to go break my fast. Have a good week.